Hello, welcome to Cicerone Live. I'm Joe Williams, and thanks for joining us tonight for this special live event. So tonight we're talking about winter climbing, and specifically about Cicerone's new winter climbing in Ben Nevis and Glen Coe guidebook, which is actually going to be published on Friday this week. And I have here in my hands one of the very rare copies that we've got so far. And yeah, they'll all be released on Friday, so everyone can get their hands on them then. So our guest tonight is Mike Pescod, who's the author of this new edition of the Winter Climbing Guide. So Mike's got 27 years of climbing experience on Ben Nevis, and he's been working for 22 years as a mountain guide in the Lochaber area and across Scotland. It was amazing to read that Mike has been climbing on Ben Nevis over 1,000 times, and that he tends to average 100 days of winter climbing every single winter. It's just amazing compared to somebody like myself that might manage like 5 days per winter. But Mike's got extensive climbing experience elsewhere. He's been on climbing trips across Europe and the rest of the world. He's climbed in Russia, Tajikistan, Nepal, East Africa, and Peru. But Mike always says there's something about the quality of the climbing in Scotland that makes it the most enjoyable and satisfying. Mike runs with his wife Louise a successful mountain guiding company called Abacus Mountain Guides, and they're based up in Fort William. So I think it's probably about time to bring in Mike. Mike, welcome.
Hello, thank you very much. Thanks for having me along.
Yeah, my pleasure. So we're going to start with a little presentation from you, Mike, and yeah, you can sort of tell us whatever you want about the new guidebook and about Scottish winter climbing in general, and then we'll move on to some questions from myself and from the audience. So that's a good point to mention how to send in questions. So it's all the usual ways for all you regulars. You can write in the comments on Facebook or in the comments on YouTube. You can email us live@cicerone.co.uk. But also remember that you can head on to our website, and where there's over 1,000 articles about walking, trekking, cycling, climbing, as well as sample routes for all the guidebooks, information about previous and upcoming events, our podcast. Like, there's tons to explore. So should we get straight to it, Mike? Let's hear what you got to say.
Fantastic, Craig. Thank you very much. So hello, folks. Yes, I've been going up and down Ben Nevis for a very long time, and I've done it lots. So it is really, really nice to be able to share some of that information with folks, face to face, chatting with people through my blogs, and but mostly through this guidebook, to try and help people just to find the right route on the right day, to get the most out of their climbing, and to have more successes than failures. I've had plenty of failures. That's a lot of how you learn stuff, by trying, working out stuff, and sometimes it not going right. And if you can focus on why that worked out that way, then you learn. So I've been through that process a lot. This is my usual commute, walking up towards Ben Nevis. On a good day, it's not always like that. We've got to remember that on the bad days, that's ice in formation. That's what we need. If the weather was like this all the time, we just wouldn't get very much ice. So all that rubbishy weather that we endure is all part of the game. And that's really it. The types of climbs that we've got in this area, Glen Coe and Ben Nevis, and all the hills around about, right across Scotland, in fact, are so varied. There's all sorts of different climbs, from ice climbs and mixed climbs and snow climbs, and in amongst all of those, there's lots of different types of ice and different factors that build a mixed climb. That what I found was, for me, learning this whole game of going winter climbing. It's really quite hard to work out which type of climb to expect, and also where to find that climb. What kind. I specifically remember looking at one climb, thinking, should it look like that, or should it be a bit different? Is that right? Is that optimum condition, or is that just a bit weird? I just don't know. And also when I was chatting with many people that are just kind of learning the winter climbing craft, it's a similar kind of thing. that, I'll say, so where have you been? What have you been up to? And they say, well, we tried such and such a climb and that was good, but then we tried this other one and it was a nightmare. It was just terrible. Don't know what went wrong. And I was thinking, well, on that day, that was the wrong place to be, that kind of climb. So there's something that I now know after 22 years of doing this every single winter, and I just wanted to find a way to get that across to people. Well, what is that information first? And how can I present this to people to help them find the right route on the right day? So that's kind of that's where we started from. And in this picture, you can see lots of different types of climb. There's cascade ice down there. There's snow ice higher up. There's mixed climbs, different types of mixed climbs. So the first thing was to try and categorize or describe the different styles of ice. So when we think of ice climbing on Ben Nevis, this is it. This is Point Five Gully. It's a strange angle to be looking at Point Five Gully, so it's not instantly recognizable, but that's the rogue pitch on Point Five Gully. And this beautiful blue ice that this guy is climbing here didn't start out as water. It starts out as snow. The snow collected in the gully higher up was funneled down into the chimney, down into the rogue pitch here, and got stuck there. It then warmed up a little bit, and the next bit of weather, as the weather changed over the next couple of days, the snow got soggy, and then when the temperature dropped again, that soggy snow turned into ice. When you repeat that process lots and lots and lots of snowfall, thaw, and then refreeze, you get this ice building up nicely in gullies like this. So the classic kind of ice that we talk about as just ice is snow ice. It started out as snow initially. So most of our climbs are like that. And that process, like I was saying, we need that bad weather. We need those storms to make those conditions to go through those cycles. And once you've done enough of those, once we've endured enough of those cycles of snowfall, thaw, and refreeze, we get some ice in some wacky places. So this is climbing out of the basin on Orion Face. This is the second slab rib. It's part of the long climb finish to Orion Direct. And I'm lucky enough to have climbed that twice, and I mean really lucky. It's incredibly rare to have ice on that, and there's no reason why ice should grow there. It's a slab of rock. There's no water dribbling down it. It's just through this process, enough cycles of this snow thaw refreeze process that ice will form there. If those cycles have just the right amount of snow and then thaw and then refreeze. So if we're really lucky, late on in the winter, we get some of these thin face climbs. So that was another category of climb, these thin face climbs. But if you go elsewhere in the world and go ice climbing, it'll be this kind of stuff. This is cascade ice, and Sally climbing up Finneskaig Falls just at the side of Aonach Moor. It's about the same level as the top of the gondola at Nevis Range. It's about 600 meters above sea level, and it's just frozen water. There's a stream in that hole to the right there. There was water falling down in the back of that little icy cave, and it's just frozen water. You just need a waterfall, persistent, very cold temperatures, and this cascade ice will form. So the kind of conditions that you need to make this persistent cold with a water supply won't make that snow ice. Persistent cold weather just doesn't make snow ice. You need that snow thaw and refreeze conditions to make that, and vice versa. So cascade ice was a different type of ice. Now this is cascade ice as well, but again it's just slightly different. So that persistent cold weather won't form this. This is me enjoying Mega Rutex up on Ben Nevis, and the water supply for this comes out of the patch of snow that's up above it. So you've got to have the snow there first, and then some thaw, enough thaw to dribble water down the cliff, and then the freeze at just the right moment to turn that dribbling water back into ice on the route. So it's a real niche thing there. There's such a particular type of weather and conditions day by day over a long period of time to create this kind of ice. So that's a very rarely forming type of ice climb. Mega Rutex, you don't see it very often, but when you do, go and climb it. It's absolutely brilliant. So snow patch cascades, those that are formed by the snow up above melting and providing the ice. So I thought those are most of the types of ice climb that we get and the types of formation. When it comes to mixed climbing, well, here's Ali having a fantastic time climbing out of Darth Vader, the cave on Darth Vader. And there's no ice there whatsoever. It's all just rock. It's a rocky mixed climb. And to climb on the rocks like that, on this particular climb, you don't need any ice, but it does need to be frozen, and it does need to be white. So these little icy crystals, these are crystals of rye mice. Now, rye mice forms very quickly. You can get this amount of rye mice forming just overnight in 12 hours. And I've seen that where the rocks have been black when I've walked out one day, and I've gone back up the next morning, 12 hours later, and all the rocks are white, down to the wind blowing the cloud onto the rocks when it's below freezing, and these beautiful feathery crystals of rye mice growing into the wind. And that's the best kind of conditions for these rocky climbs. It's got to be frozen and solid, as in all the blocks frozen together. But then it can go white with this rye mice. It takes a little bit longer for turfy mixed climbs. So right now I'm going climbing with Ali, who's in that picture, tomorrow. And it's really early in the season, so I think what we'll be looking for is a rocky mixed climb, because they form up really, really quickly. You don't need any ice. We haven't got any ice. It's too early in the season. So a rocky mixed climb will be just perfect. Something like this, Talibalan, climbing with Louisa Reynolds here. It's really turfy. You can see great big dots of turf just above her there, and further up in the chimney that we climbed, there's massive lumps of turf right across this crag, which is in the Grey Corries, Stokecorrine and Louis. Turf takes at least 2 weeks of really cold weather to freeze solid. So right now, this would be a horrible climb because those big lumps of turf just wouldn't be at all solid. So it's great to know which are the turfy climbs and which are the rocky climbs. But actually, this climb is really interesting because higher up on it, this corner that we climbed on the last pitch, Louisa leading me off up here, it was all rock. This is in November, about 4 years ago, and I went back in late January in the same winter, and this was that same corner. This is the corner with lots of ice in it. Just with the weather that we'd had, Louisa's feet were about where my ice axes are in this picture. Slightly different angle, but you can see the amount of ice that built up. So that kind of detail of information is in this book. It talks about this one being a turfy mixed climb that then turns into an icy mixed climb. And crucially, you can climb it as either one. It doesn't actually matter. For some mixed climbs, if there's ice on it, it's a nightmare. You really don't want it. And on other mixed climbs, you really do want ice on it. So the icy mixed climbs is another category. So like this one here, this is John climbing with me in Ravens Gully. Now this is a really icy mixed climb. Don't go there when there's no ice. You need lots of snow to build up and for it to turn into ice for that to be much fun at all. So that's round on Buchaleta Moor in Glen Coe. So there you go. Lots of different styles of climb, which in the book I've tried to describe how each style of climb forms, what weather requirements you have to form each of those particular ingredients, like what you need to make rime, what you need to make the snow ice, and what time period, all of those kind of things, so that when people come up here and go climbing, they can think, oh, what's the weather been like? What kind of things should I expect? So, for example, right now it is rocky mixed climbs that we're looking for. So, but which of those climbs? That was the next thing. So that's what we've done with all of the climbs. It's in the bottom right-hand side of this picture here. It's the climb symbols. Every climb has at least one of these symbols to put it into a category, a style of climb. So one of those rocky mixed, top right-hand little icon there is what we're looking for right now. So we're likely to go up here, up onto Ben Nevis, somewhere really high up. So the book is, these are pages from the book. This is Grade VIII up on Ben Nevis, and there's a little box that gives you some brief information about each and every crag. So this is really high up. It's at 1,100 meters. So it's got a good chance of being up there in the clouds and cold enough because it's so high up. So I think that's a really good place to go. And it also says that there's quite a few rocky mixed routes in there. So that sounds good. And it tells you how to get there. Then on the right here, well, there's the topo. But each of these routes has got these little icons. So the secret there is a rocky mixed climb. That kind of brown square with the ice axe in means it's a rocky mixed climb. And Cornucopia is just the same. Bit hard for me for the first route of the season. So if we flick over the page, oh look, there's Darth Vader. There's Ali climbing Darth Vader, and it's a rocky mixed climb as well. So these are the kind of things that we think will be good to go tomorrow, we think. But South Sea Bubble is an icy mixed climb. It's a blue ice axe there. So just a very quick glance, we can go, all right, so that's an icy mixed climb. But given the weather that we've had, that's probably not going to be there. I don't think the ice has formed, so that's probably not going to be any good. And especially South Gully, that thing there, the circle means it's ice. That blue figure inside means it's snow ice. That's not going to be there. We've not had the snow. We've not had any thaw freeze cycles with lots of snow. So that's just, not on the cards at all. So just at a glance, we can look through these routes and decide which one would be a good one to go for. And again, just over the page, because once you start thinking about this, you start thinking about particular routes that are really awkward. And Lost the Place was one of those, because it can be quite rocky mixed, and it goes when it's just rocky mixed, but then also it can form some ice, and it forms a very nice icy mixed climb. So I've put that Lost the Place there can be an icy mixed climb or a rocky mixed climb. You don't have to have both. It can be one or the other. So it can be very good early in the season when there's no ice, and then later on when there is ice, it's still very, very good. So, there's that level of detail in there. So hopefully, I'm really interested to find out how this goes, because I don't think there's any guidebook out there with this level of information. There's other books describing types of climb and gives a few examples of those right across Scotland, and more of this information is coming out. But I think this is a lot of information in one guidebook that, well, hopefully will help people find the right route on the right day and have more success. There you go. That's what we've got.
Wow, Mike, that's absolutely awesome. I guess I'm trying to take in everything that you're saying about how these climbs, these different styles of climbs form, and actually, I don't know, it's sort of like hearing you say it was quite a bit more helpful than reading it in a kind of a textbook, and sort of seeing, for example, seeing Point Five Gully and that sort of first picture, and how you're explaining, well, it's not actually water that forms this ice, it's snow that then goes through that thaw and then refreeze cycle repeatedly that builds it up, isn't it? It's good to have it illustrated, but it seems like complicated. It seems really complicated. Do you need to it feels almost like you need to be a meteorologist or something to understand how am I meant to use this information to understand what conditions are going to be happening at the time, therefore what kind of style climb should I be going for? What are the kind of the tools that I need?
Yeah, so I think you're totally right that we do need to be meteorologists, or at least we need to look at the weather, and I think we're quite used to that as climbers. I remember coming up before I lived here. I remember coming up here, and I'll be looking at the weather forecast for weeks before I came up here, the avalanche forecast, and trying to get some information just to see, when it was snowing, when it was thawing, when it was freezing, what the temperatures were like, just to try and get an idea of that. So I think we're quite used to that, and generally people will be there the night before going climbing, just looking at all that information. So yes, we've got lots of very good weather forecasts. The Met Office does a brilliant high altitude forecast for very specific mountains, as well as the Mountain Weather Information Service. And just by looking at these day by day by day, you start to get a bit of an idea of exactly what's going on, not just right now and for tomorrow, but over the last couple of weeks or even months when it's later on in the winter. So it's a very important thing to do that, as well as look at the Avalanche Information Service. So in terms of going to the right place, definitely want to go somewhere where there's not a high chance of being avalanched, clearly. But that's the primary function of that service. But by reading it, and by reading it in detail day after day after day, again, you get to build this really good picture of how much snow there is and what's happened to it. You can get really geeky because on that avalanche report, they'll put the results of the pit test. So every day these people go out and dig pits down through the snow, and they record what they see, all the different layers, the icy layers and the soft layers, and they put it there. That's out there to go and have a look at. So there is a vast amount of information there, as well as temperature recordings up at 1,200 meters at Nevis Range, at 900 meters, and at 600 meters. over the last 2 weeks. You can look at all of that data. So it's all the data is there. But again, if you don't know what that means, if you don't know what will happen when the temperature spikes for 2 hours and then goes down again, it's kind of meaningless. So that's where this book comes in. It says about a thaw freeze cycle being very good, and it also says about how long a thaw freeze, whether 12 hours is long enough or should it be a day or 2 days. It describes all of those things. So it will still take time. There's no doubt. There are so many factors. It will take a long time to really kind of get to grips with all of these different things and choose the best route choose the best route every single day. That still doesn't happen. But, I've got far more chance of success these days after learning all this stuff.
Yeah, that all makes sense. And it's a good point. The book does have, you've included a good section in the introduction about how the conditions form and what the weather's doing that's separate to what these different styles of climbs are. So I don't know, I've read the book quite a few times now, but I think if I do another 10 reads or so, I think the depth of all that information is going to keep soaking in. But I think, I don't know, it sounds to me like looking maybe a couple of weeks ahead. And okay, I know that I've got a spare weekend in a couple of weeks' time. The schedule's clear. We're gonna make the journey. That's the kind of time where I should be starting looking at the weather and reading the avalanche information blogs and that sort of thing.
Yes, yep, exactly that. Yes, definitely. And actually kind of a wee step before that, because if you're coming up now in December, there's only certain climbs that are ever going to be available. There's never, Point Five Gully just isn't going to be there. Mega Route X is never going to be there in December, I would say. There's information about that, about the progression of the winter. So if you're coming up in a couple of weeks in December, you'll be kind of zoning in on a few types of climb to expect, and certainly not quite a few others. Whereas if you come up at the end of February, well, it could be anything. We could have all sorts of different things. And again, when you come up in April, there's far more chance that there's going to be really good ice, but not a lot of chance of rime being forming up on the rocks. The rocky mixed climbs just won't be very good. So there's quite a lot of stuff about that, about the progression of the winter, at what time you're coming up here. But yes, exactly that. 2 weeks in advance, start looking at the weather forecast, start getting an idea of what's there currently, and we can do that through different blogs. I quite often put up onto my blog through my business what climbs I've been on, what type of climbs are good to go right now, and I know many other people do the same. So there is information like that. So. 2 weeks out, start tracking the weather and the avalanche information and all the blogs, and the idea is that you arrive going, right, I've got a bit of an idea of what's going on here, and you should be able to find your climb really well.
It just sounds like it's all really in the planning stage, and I think that's something that when I was personally getting into winter climbing, that I didn't realize that was a part of the process. So I think that, right, okay, it's the Christmas holidays, up to Scotland we go, and we'll turn up at on Ben Nevis or at Stobcar and Lochan, and we'll go climbing. That didn't really always work very well for me. Like the obvious sort of examples are attempting a mixed route. I think a Grade IV that took absolutely hours to climb, because I think it was just covered in powder snow, and I suppose at that time I didn't really know that that's what it was not meant to be covered in, and that we should have chosen something else. But that was we got up the thing, but it took all day, and it wasn't very fun, and it felt quite scary.
I can relate to that so much. Yes, absolutely. Starting out for many years, I was doing much the same kind of thing like that. In fact, my very first day up here was in Glen Coe, and there was no planning by me. I just followed my friends, and they said, "Right, we're going up here." I said, "Oh, okay, let's go up there then. That'll do." And it was only a few years afterwards that worked out. Oh, that Broad Gully on Stubcorrie and Aonach. Right, okay, that's what that was. I'd absolutely no idea, no thought of planning or anything. I was a bit better after that. I had some idea of where to go, but yeah, you're exactly right. It is that planning phase that's really important, and actually is kind of really adds to it. It's most evenings, me and everybody like me, we're wrangling with all of this information that we're getting, trying to work out what the best solution is. Where's kind of safe to go? Where's going to give good climbing? What style of climb? And where is that? How do we find that? And that takes, my mind is continually churning and looking for more information, like every night and in the run up to every day of climbing.
Yeah,
and that's part of it, because when you get it right, it feels so good.
Yeah, I bet that really does add to the satisfaction side of things. Yeah, I mean, I think it is when you have done your planning and you have taken into account all the the weather and the avalanche situation, and then hopefully as well not gone to some route that uh, 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 50 other people have decided to do that day as well, and then the climbing turns out to be really good. Then that does feel pretty good.
It is great. And as I remember one that I climbed actually with Ali again over on Garelven at Ardgour. It was a couple of years ago, and this great gully on Garelven, which nobody I know has climbed it. This is it. I was trying to get information from all my friends, everybody that I could think of to call, and nobody had ever climbed this thing. So there was no information, absolutely none, But we kind of pieced together what altitude it was, what aspect, and what kind of climbing we thought it might be. It's a gully climb, so you kind of expect some ice to be in there and stuff. And we took a total punt. I had no idea, thinking it should work out, and it was amazing. We just dialed it. It was so good. It was such a good day.
Awesome. I mean, especially when the weather's good, it can be pretty magic. But
Yes.
I've got some more questions that I want to ask you about gear and kit and sort of the how to avoid the misery side of things. But we'll get to that. First, I just wanted to just say thanks to Nathan for his question. He says that the book looks amazing. Thanks, Nathan. His question is like whether you've got any advice on getting back to winter climbing after this long summer season off, and how to be fit and ready to climb and mentally fit too. I mean, like for myself, I'm in the climbing wall, a couple of times a week at the moment. But is that really what I need, or what Nathan needs to get ready for the winter?
So to avoid the first day out when you're trying to work out which way up your crampons and to go and when do I put my gloves on now? No, I'll have a sandwich. No, I need a pee harness. I'll put my harness on first. To all that faff on the first day, it just feels like, it feels awful, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I still get a bit of that. But there is some. So what I do to prepare is just, to stay fit. You dial that, absolutely. Go running, go biking. Make sure your cardiovascular is good, and you've been out on some good long days. I mean, walking in the mountains in the autumn is wonderful. It's quite burly, with some quite intense weather. It can be just fantastic, and it's setting you up well. I will also remind you about how to look after yourself, how to stay warm and dry and comfortable in those difficult conditions. So it's well worth doing all of that. And yes, of course, go to the climbing wall, but do try and dangle on your ice axes if you can. If there's any dry tooling at the climbing wall, some climbing walls have got some dry tooling that you're allowed to do. There are one or two crags coming up in certain areas where you can go dry tooling. Don't just go dry tooling anywhere, folks. It's got to be at the right place where it's generally kind of accepted that it's okay to do that. And that's really handy because it does feel weird dangling on your ice axes. And if you've just been doing a little bit of that, it does feel a lot better when you first get out and do it for real on a winter climb. So, stay fit, get ready for it, and do some dangling on your ice axes.
Practice putting your crampons on at home before you.
Yes. If you're like me at the last climb at the end of the last winter, I've been just like, that was fantastic. Put those in the cupboard, forget about them, and then I just got mine out today. Think I'm going climbing tomorrow. My crampons, they're still blunt as anything. I need to sharpen those. I need to check the bolts on my ice axes. I could have done that straight months ago, but
Yeah, definitely. What you said about being careful where you dry tool. Oh, we just had a question that came in on the email actually that was about how to be like environmentally aware when you're winter climbing. Like what I guess what are the no-nos?
So in terms of ice you can climb ice anytime. It's fantastic. But so we're really talking about mixed climbing, so buttresses and ridges. And yes, generally the crags need to look white and be frozen. So that rime ice that I showed you is kind of on the inside of the cave and it covered the roof of the cave, those rocks would not look white if it just snowed. So snow just comes straight down out of the sky. It'll land on the ledges, and the vertical bits and the overhanging bits will still be black. And we don't go and climb rocks that are black like that. They need to be white and wintry in appearance. And that's there's a bit of. I'm not sure that's about protecting the rock. A lot of people say that that's about protecting the rock when there's ice or snow or rime or something on the rock. It'll protect the rock and stop us from scratching it and damaging it with the ice axes and the crampons. I'm not entirely convinced that that's the case. I think it's more just the rules of the game. It's the rules of engagement. If we go dry tooling up classic rock climbs, it'll be easier than if it's all covered in white stuff. So the rules that we set ourselves are it's got to be white. And we try very hard to stick to that. Try very hard. It's tempting sometimes to get onto something after you've walked in thinking, yep, it's going to be white, it's going to be great. And then you get there and go, it's not very white. But we've just walked in for 2 hours. You can kind of convince yourself, but don't do that. So wait for it to be white. And but also, kind of mentioned their classic rock climbs. That there was a while back, 15, 20 years ago, there's a trend for people to find classic mountain rock climbs and go and do them in winter. And it's still a thing, but we've kind of acknowledged that yes, there is damage done to the rock, and some rock climbs we might like to keep as really nice rock climbs and try not to damage them.
Yeah.
So if you do go and climb something, a classic climb. I climbed Engineers Cracks up on Buccleuch Moor, which is an E1 rock climb. It's an amazing rock climb. It's really, really nice. Donald and I went to climb it. It was so white you could hardly see the rock, and we just made absolutely sure of that. And then also just how we climbed it was very carefully, very precisely. We wanted to make sure that we weren't damaging the rock, and we achieved that. I've been back to climb it as a rock climb, and there's not a mark on it. So, we can be very careful like that. But the modern trend is when you're finding new routes is to find winter-only routes. Yeah. So these aren't rock climbs in the summer. These are often quite manky, wet, turfy, horrible bits of cliff that you wouldn't go anywhere near in the summer, but in the winter turn into a dream.
So how does the turf side of things play into it? Because you can when you feel it, like, oh, okay, that feels like almost like ice as I'm going into it. It feels really secure. And then I don't know, there are times where I've turned up at the bottom of a crag and sort of swung into something and thought, oh no, this is not remotely frozen at all. We're going to have to find another plan. You mentioned to me recently about that we don't want it to snow right now. That sounds probably sounds quite counterintuitive to a lot of people. Why? Surely it's winter climbing. Surely we want it to snow right now.
No, not right. Not straight away. First off, you want the ground to cool down. We've had winters where the snow just arrived straight away, and so much snow came that it didn't ever melt off. The ground didn't really cool down. There's a strange thing about snow. It's actually quite insulating from the air. So with that layer of snow, it doesn't matter how cold it is, the air temperature, it's not really going to freeze the ground very well afterwards. And there was one winter, I can't remember, like 7 or 8 winters ago, we had so much snow. It was phenomenal, the amount of snow. The avalanches were quite incredible. But I remember climbing Observatory Ridge, and right up high, about 1,300 meters in February, there was so much snow I had to dig down through this to find the rock, to find some kind of an anchor. And it was all just loose and rubbly still. It wasn't frozen. The ground underneath just hadn't frozen. And it didn't freeze all winter, really, in lots of places. So then when it came to the spring, the snow melted away super quickly because underneath the ground was relatively warm. And that's the thing in a shorter cycle. If you get snow straight away before the ground has cooled down, it's going to melt away far quicker than if the ground has cooled down to start off with. So you want the ground to freeze so that it's solid, so we can climb the turf. When it's not mushy, you want it frozen solid, and then when the snow comes, the snow's going to hang around for much longer because it's not going to be melted from underneath, if you like, when the ground is cold.
Yeah, makes sense now you explain it. We had a question from Jonathan on YouTube, who I think you probably answered it there, but he just wanted to sort of clarify that if vegetation is properly frozen, then it's less likely to be damaged.
That's exactly right. Yes, yeah. And there's something about keeping the roots good for everybody else. Well, there's an ecological thing as well. We don't want to be ripping turf and potentially rare plants out of the crags just by climbing them when they're not frozen. So do wait until the turf is frozen. It's a lot nicer anyway, far less scary. So do wait, but it takes 2 weeks. It takes 2 weeks of really cold weather for the turf to freeze properly. But then, crags that are facing the wind will cool down a lot more quickly. The wind blowing onto the wind chill effect that we know about when we're in the wind. We feel really cold. It's the same on the crags. These little bits of turf freeze far quicker when they're on a windward facing crag. So there's some variability, but give it at least a couple of weeks for the turf to freeze.
Yeah. So for those of us in the UK, particularly in the more northerly parts of the UK, it's starting to feel pretty chilly at the moment. This feels like it's maybe a good start to winter. I'm hoping to come up for a couple of days climbing between Christmas and New Year. Probably there's quite a lot of people who sort of fall into that boat as well. What do we want the weather to be doing between now and then, in an ideal world, for there to be good climbing conditions for different kinds of styles?
Yeah, so we need this winter. Right now, we've got a really good start. I think this week, especially on the west coast, is going to be great because it's cold without too much snow, so it's going to cool down the ground really nicely, and we're going to get at least a week of very cold weather. So that's a good start. It's a little bit late in coming, I must admit. It would have been nice had it done this back in November, but we'll take it. Between now and when you get here, between now and the holiday period, to get more range of styles of climb in condition, ready to go, we need some snowfall, we need some thaw, we need some freeze cycles. So we need some stormy weather. We need some pretty rubbish weather to bring snowfall. Fronts tracking across from the Atlantic that bring snowfall, and then temperature fluctuations. Warm periods followed by cold periods, just to build some of that snowpack. I mean, at the moment, the boulders and the scree on the slopes leading up to the crags are still very bouldery. There's no snow on them, so it'd be really nice to get those covered in snow, and then for that snow to thaw out and refreeze to turn into a really nice solid, a good solid base of snow that we can just walk up very easily with the crampons on to get to the climb. And of course, that same process will build the snow ice in the gullies. And that could easily happen before the holidays, over the next 2-3 weeks.
So there might be potential for some gullies to climb, not just the colder mixed routes.
There's definitely that chance, absolutely. If we get those weather cycles, if we don't get those weather cycles, if it just stays cold for the next 3 weeks, then think about cascade climbing. There's Ben Nevis would be fantastic if it stays really cold, and things like that Finniscake Falls. There's going to be cascade ice around if it stays like that, if we don't get the storms. But so it's kind of like that. Whatever happens, there will be something fun to go and do. So Tower Ridge, just with a little bit of snow on it, is a real challenge. It's harder than it might be with some nice snowy ice on it, but it's still amazing. It's always absolutely amazing. So in an ideal world, yes, we'll get some storms and some cycles that build the ice in the gullies. But whatever happens, there'll be something to go and do and to enjoy.
Cool. Well, I'll keep an eye on the forecast and the avalanche stuff, and start taking in the data.
Absolutely, start that processing.
Yeah. People talk about climbing on Ben Nevis in sort of almost mythical terms. For those people that listening that may not have climbed on the Ben, what's so special about it?
So, oh man, where do you start? I think much of it is that challenge. So the challenge comes in lots of different ways. So yes, the grade, of course, yes, but it's the style, as in the overall style, the traditional style of UK climbing. That there's not fixed protection. We don't bolt climbs. We don't have fixed belays on most of the climbs. There are a few kind of aging, rusting pegs in place on some of the belays. Of course, there are, yes. But generally the ethic is to keep our crags and our mountains as clean of all that infrastructure as possible. So you're always in for quite an adventurous climb. And also because of the ephemeral nature of it, because it does change so much, the conditions, the weather, change the climate conditions so much that it's quite hard to be in the right place at the right time. So therefore, when you are in the right place at the right time, and you get that wonderful moment when everything just aligns beautifully, it's just such a phenomenal experience. Absolutely wonderful. So it's a big experience in a relatively small package. I mean, Ben Nevis is not high compared to the Alps or the Caucasus or mountains kind of elsewhere in the world. They're tiny. So we get some visitors from abroad coming here going, oh, what is this? This is not very big. This cannot be very good. But then they experience the weather and the conditions and the runouts and all those uncertainties. And when they learn to cope with all of that and manage all of that, the experience is far more profound, I would say.
Yeah, isn't there like a French language guidebook for Ben Nevis? Or
yes, so Godfrey Peru, yes,
yeah.
he came here. A French mountain guide, Godfrey Peru, came here for many years, bringing the French customers over. He would stay at the CRC hut for a few weeks, cooking them all sorts of fancy food, crêpes and all sorts of wonderful things. So it's a really good vibe, and really liked as a person, as a climber coming over here. He was very highly thought of, and it would be a fantastic experience for somebody in France to come over to Scotland and experience Ben Nevis.
Yeah. That's cool. It's good that it does have that. It's recognised as having kind of an international attraction, and that it's sort of legitimately good, and not just what we're stuck with in the UK. We have this habit in Scottish winter climbing of climbing when the weather is really bad. That you don't seem to do that often in Europe or in the US. I guess it's because we don't really have that many days where the weather might be perfect and the conditions might be perfect at the same time. Is that generally why we just accept that it's fine to go climbing in a snowstorm?
Yes, that's one reason. Yes, absolutely. So we just kind of muscle up and get on with it. And because half the time, when you go out in those pretty rubbish conditions, you can actually get some very good climbing done. Or you go out expecting it to be pretty horrible and the weather forecast wasn't quite right. It turns out kind of all right, Those unexpectedly good days are lovely, they're like a bonus. You're expecting to be pummeled all day, and actually you go, oh, well, this you're right. So you get some really good days that way. But also, out in the Alps, you've got different hazards. So if you're up high, you've got glaciers to deal with crevasses and far bigger slopes in terms of avalanche hazard. That can be a big problem. Seracs. So moving around on glaciated terrain when you can't see very well is really challenging. It's very dangerous. There's all sorts of things that can go wrong. So out in the Alps, it tends to be that if the weather is that bad, you just can't find your way across the glacier. You just tend not to do it. So you end up going out on the sunny days, which there are many in the Alps. I mean, there are many horrible days as well, but I think there are more sunny days than we have over here, that's for sure. So it kind of feels like, well, you only go out on the sunny days out in the Alps because of those objective dangers. Whereas here, if you just go out on the sunny days, you might get 4 or 5 days of climbing each winter. So you just have to go out and learn it. And it's part of it, when you can manage that weather and the really challenging conditions, just keeping your fingers warm, keeping yourself warm and comfortable, and keeping going, navigating, finding your way around in those really challenging conditions. It provides its own satisfaction. It's a skill to learn, it's a craft to develop, but once you've got that, it feels brilliant, very rewarding.
So now I'm in front of this fountain of knowledge that you are, Mike. I'm thinking about times where I've climbed and the weather I feel like the weather has meant that the routes that we've chosen to do have not been the right ones. It's not necessarily that it was terrible weather, but it maybe felt like it was the wrong weather for that particular route. For example, it's sometimes fine to go climbing when it's snowing or when it's windy, but I remember an experience on, I think, Italian right hand, on Ben Nevis, where it was blowing snow upwards at us, and we couldn't see anything at all. And then it would stop doing that, and it would blow snow straight down. It was pretty difficult to make progress, let alone see your hands on your axes in front of you. So I'm guessing that was just the wrong route for that weather that day.
So I shouldn't laugh, but I'm only laughing because I've been there. I've done exactly that. Those days when the spindrift comes down on top of you first, and then gets blown back up you, and then falls down a third, so it goes past you 3 times.
It doesn't seem fair.
It's not fair. It's definitely not fair. It shouldn't happen, but it does. So. So maybe a buttress climb where there's going to be less spindrift. You know, the funnel effect of the gullies, and Italian right hand isn't much of a gully, but higher up there's a gully that then kind of pours everything down on top of you there. So if you can avoid the gullies, then you're going to have far less spindrift. So that photo that I showed of somebody climbing Point Five Gully, I was on a route right next to it. It's called Point Blank, which was phenomenal routes, very rarely in condition again. So I was so lucky to be able to go and climb Point Blank. Now, my pal Donald climbed Point Blank just a couple of days before I did. When he climbed it, the snowstorm happened, and he was having a burly time, but it was kind of all right. They were on the buttress, so no funnel above them, lots of snow, but not anything like what you're describing, not too much. But he could see somebody in about that position, the same as on that photo that I showed you, in Point Five Gully in that snowstorm, and that was just horrific. The guy, he couldn't help. My pal Donald couldn't help the guy in Point Five Gully. He was kind of too far away, but he could certainly hear exactly what the emotion, the emotional turmoil that this guy was going through, being pummeled by spindrift just everywhere. Point Five Gully on that day didn't work out. Wasn't the best choice. But right next to it, the buttress next to it was okay.
Okay. So might it have been the case that day, the other side of the mountain, in inverted commas, might have been fine to do from a gully perspective?
It can be, yes, absolutely. It takes very little wind. I mean, often you think, it's windy today. I want to be on the sheltered side of the mountain because there's going to be no wind. We'll stay out of the wind. Yeah, great. The problem is that the wind blows the snow over the top and drops it down onto you on that climb. It also means that climb might, if it's a mixed climb, it might not be as well frozen. The wind chill effect I mentioned, the wind going onto the crag really cools down the rock, the ground, the turf, and can provide far better climbing conditions and grows the rime as well on the rocks. So actually choosing the windy side can actually be a very good plan. The downside is that, yes, just at the top there, if the wind is going over the top, when you look down to put your feet on something, the wind is going straight up into your face. That could be pretty hard. But often it is only just that top little bit, just getting over at the top, that's really got that wind. So many times I've climbed on the windy side of the mountains, and it's been far better.
Good to know. I think I'm going to have to watch this episode back again and put up with listening to my own voice to take it all in. We've had another question from James, and James basically stole one of my questions, so it's really relevant to me anyway. James says, "Thanks for the super talk. The guidebook looks great. Can I ask about the balance between training and experience? I'm looking to progress into climbing grade 6, grade 7. And I'm wondering whether I should prioritize mileage and experience, i.e. getting out as much as possible, or whether dry tooling and other training becomes quite important at this level too. Thanks, James."
So I would say winter-specific training from kind of grade 6, grade 7, about where you're getting to there is very useful, definitely. If you want to progress beyond grade 7, you're really going to have to do some quite specific training on tools. So that's dry tooling, that's pull-ups and all sorts of things just on your tools. So definitely do some of that from that kind of grade 6, 7, kind of as you progress up the way. Then specific training is good. Before that, really, it's just days out, learning your craft. and learning all those little things. I mean, it seems daft, but just all sorts of little things about how to stay warm and dry and comfortable. There are loads of little tips that will work for you that might not work so well for me, but each one of us learns our own system, our own formula for how we can stay warm and dry, and that is such a crucial thing. Not just that, but staying comfortable in terms of being relaxed on the cliff, on the climb that you're on. So both of those things take quite a lot of mileage, just being out in all sorts of different weather, all sorts of different conditions, and learning all of those things. But being really quite focused on those. So learn ways to keep your hands dry and warm. What type of gloves have you got? What do you wear underneath? How do you layer up? How do you keep them dry when you're on? I've gone through a good number of gloves in my life. The search for the perfect glove is never ending. I think I'm kind of getting better, but some of the gloves in my arsenal are rubber gloves, like industrial gloves that you might use in a fish packing kind of factory, marine harvest.
What do you use them for?
I'll use them when I go climbing, because when it's wet, on those wet days, they are the only thing that's going to keep me dry and comfortable. They're rubbish for wiping snot off your nose, but they're brilliant for keeping your hands dry. So, and they are just proper rubber gloves. So that's I tried out these like 25 years ago. I thought, I wonder if you could use rubber gloves, and they've come on so much now. There's some really specialist glove manufacturers that produce like 400 different types of gloves. It's good research, well worth looking into. So mileage for all the way up to 3, 4, 5, grade 6. Just consolidate your grade. Don't be thinking that once you've done 2 grade 5s, you're ready for a grade 6. Don't do lots of different grade 5s, lots of different styles of climb, lots of grade 5s in different weather, and even the same climb on different days will be very, very different. And every time you do it, you'll just learn something. You learn something about the conditions and how to climb it, how to protect it, and you become comfortable in all those different things, so that when you nudge the grade up the way, that bank of experience is there for you and will really help you nudge up the way to the next grade. So mileage counts for a lot.
Yeah, I hope that helps, James. That's helped me. We've got a question from Jonathan again. He says, "What's the best approach for the Ben this winter?" I think presumably by approach, Jonathan, you mean the way of approach getting to the crag. There's a bunch of ways that you can approach the.
So it's a thing that it's going to be a little bit tricky this winter. Forestry and Land Scotland in the past was very good in allowing us to drive up through the forest if you wanted to invest in the access permission and the key that would let you go up to the top car park. Now they're doing forestry work. There's the clear felling at the top of that forest above Torlundy. So nobody's going to be driving up. Everybody's going to be starting from North Face Car Park. And North Face Car Park, there were problems with just the number of people coming and using that car park, and more especially the track on the way down. It got blocked a couple of times. There was some kind of inconsiderate parking. So you can't park on the track anymore. We've just got North Face Car Park. So on busy weekends, it's going to get full. It's going to get full really early. So that could be a problem. So there are other places you can start from in town. Just if you go and park at Marks and Spencer's, what a place to go and start a day of winter climbing. Let's go to Marks and Spencer's. But there's a car park there. You can walk out past the smelter, the aluminium smelter, and up the big track that leads into the Outer Woodland Path from there. Much further from Nevis Range, but you could start from there. You could ride your bike up through the forest tracks to help out with that. But I think that's probably what the question is about there. North Face Car Park is still there. It's still fine. But I think on those really busy weekends, it is going to get really busy. So, as in the car park's going to get full of cars. So, on those weekends, just maybe get there really early, or think about one of these others.
Are there ever times where, Mike, you would choose to start from the Glen Nevis side and walk over past the Lochan, or is that just for if you fancied a longer walk?
Mostly that, but it does work fine. It's the traditional approach. There's still, for Conmod, Jeddah, there are still many descriptions saying to start from there, go over the shoulder and down. It's actually a little bit tricky because on that shoulder, if it's really snowy quite low down, the shoulder as you go around from the halfway lock and in towards the Altavuden can cornice. It can collect quite a bit of snow. It's a bit awkward to locate, and the path can get covered in snow. So it's actually not such a great way in. So probably stick with the other side. Walking up from Torlundi somewhere.
Yeah, good tip. I think probably last question that we've sort of really got time for it's just one from me, and I just wanted to ask you kind of how you felt about this. We're about to publish this 8th edition of the book, and the first edition of this was published in 1969.
That was Ian Clough, wasn't it?
It was Ian Clough, yeah.
Who made the first descent of Point Five Gully. It's amazing.
So the books had kind of authors and revisers, with names like Ian Clough, Hamish McInnes revised the 2nd edition, Alan Kimber. I guess I just wanted to ask, how does that sort of feel to you?
Almost like I don't belong there, I must admit, because that's a phenomenal list of names that you just read out, and Ed Grinley did one as well. Don't forget him. He's all of these people are absolutely phenomenal in what they contributed to climbing, to mountain culture. Hamish McInnes is was a total legend, and his contribution to all sorts of things, to mountain rescue, the Search and Rescue Dogs Association, to climbing skills, the number of books he's written, the films he's written, is a phenomenal character. So yes, I feel very honoured to be kind of associated in that group of people. I'm very grateful to Alan Kimber, who approached me many years ago and said, would I consider taking on the book? Now, he did 3 revisions of it, and laid the ground brilliantly. So I'm very grateful to him to pass it on to me.
Oh, you're totally deserving of it, Mike, of course. And you've done an amazing job with the book, but that kind of handing things over and sort of the long-term kind of I don't know, like ownership or of a book is something that kind of it features in quite a lot of Cicerone books. Is this sort of handing things on? I really like that about the book. So no, I think you've done an amazing job with the book. It's fantastic.
Thank you very much. I'm so interested in how it goes. It is I'm just interested whether people find this useful, this new approach to the information that's in there. So I really hope so. And I'm very keen for feedback as well. So once people have the book in their hands and they're out climbing, I'd love to know what people's experiences are, whether it's useful, whether it can be tweaked or developed, or whether it's a load of rubbish. I don't know. I think it'll be useful. I can only think it'll be useful, but I'd love to know people's experience.
That's great to put out that call for feedback. Yeah, we'd love to hear it, whether it's to you or to Cicerone. Use the book, tell us what you think, and we'll see what we can do for next time around as well.
Absolutely, great.
Mike, thanks so much for joining us and sharing your unbelievable knowledge with us. It's been an absolute pleasure. Remember, everybody, that the guidebooks are going to be published on Friday this week, but you can already pre-order it right now from the Cicerone website. So thanks a lot to you, our audience, for joining us and for all the really good questions that we had tonight. The recording will be on the Cicerone Facebook page, on YouTube, and on the Cicerone website, so you can send it to anyone that might have missed it, missed coming to the event tonight. So subscribe to our newsletter, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and we'll be keeping you up to date there. So hopefully we'll see you at our next Cicerone live event, or out on the trail or out on the crag. Thanks very much, everybody. Have a good night.